everyone! At the beginning of the month, you may have heard or even celebrated the fact that International Women's Day was on March 8th. According to the official International Women's Day website, this annual celebration is a day dedicated to the advancement of women worldwide and is used as both a call to action for advancing gender equality and as a designated platform to reflect on the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women worldwide. Here in Hants County, we have more than our fair share of influential women, past and present, and in this video, we are going to take a look at some of the former who, over the years, have made significant contributions to both our community and the world at large, memorialized in the research room here at the West Hants Historical Society. I'd like to begin by spotlighting someone who is the subject of a recent fundraiser here at the West Hants Historical Society, and who accomplished more things in her lifetime than most would wish to achieve in 3. Kathrine Kay Anslow, who throughout her life was a historian, athlete, teacher, editor, publisher, and committed volunteer. She was born in Windsor in 1911, granddaughter of James Anslow, owner of the Saturday Mail, which he later renamed to the Hants Journal, the very same we have today. FYI, for the majority of her biography, I will be quoting the material we have on her from WHHS's 2024 Maplewood Cemetery Tour. As an adolescent, Kay was a diligent student at the Windsor Academy and an active participant on many of her school's sports teams, including the ladies' hockey team, as a result of which she was later inducted into the Windsor Hockey Heritage Society's Hall of Fame. On top of athleticism and academia, Kay was also known to be a popular young woman, a testament to that being her victory in the 1933 Miss Windsor beauty pageant. After Kay's graduation from high school in 1929, she helped to establish a school of business in collaboration with King's College, and later created her own school of business in the office above the Hants Journal, where she taught until she closed it in 1965, after which she would teach at Windsor Regional High School until her retirement. Additionally, when James Anslow retired from the Hants Journal in 1914, he passed the business down to his son, Harold Anslow, who subsequently served as head of the paper until his death 38 years later in 1952. From that point on, his daughter, Kay, inherited the Hants Journal. 2 years later, in 1954, Kay would purchase the journal's rival newspaper, the Windsor Tribune, and amalgamate the two. And although she eventually had to give up her position as editor, Kay remained involved at the paper for some time after her retirement. Business was Kay's profession, but sports was her passion. Throughout her life, she played baseball, tennis, curling, and golf. She was also an avid cross-country skier, and she loved to fish in the lakes along Chester Road. While working and after her retirement, Kay was constantly volunteering with various fundraisers and events for all types of organizations in Windsor. For example, during the Second World War, one of the main military transfer bases in Canada was located on Wentworth Road. Kay took it upon herself to organize a show to entertain the troops. This show grew into the Windsor Concert Party, a variety show that included singing, dancing, and comedy. The group even took the show on the road to army bases all over Nova Scotia. The show ran for 5 seasons until the end of the war in 1945. Kay Anslow died in 2004. All of her hard work was in an effort to make Windsor a better place, and she succeeded. You may recall earlier when I mentioned a fundraiser held here at the West Hants Historical Society that Kay was the subject of. Its purpose was to raise the funds required to engrave her name on the headstone under which she is buried. You see, she is buried in Maplewood Cemetery with her parents, but is not officially recognized on the designated gravestone with them. This winter, however, West Hants Historical Society was able to raise the necessary $300 that was required to engrave her name and have her legacy honored alongside her parents. Here in the research room at West Hants Historical Society, Kay Anslow's collection has become an important resource for our genealogical library. The Anslow photo collection has been donated to WHHS, allowing this valuable resource to be preserved and made available to everyone in Windsor. Additionally, Kay's love of reading the newspaper was evident from a young age, as she would save clippings from her father's Hants Journal. She continued this practice throughout her life, and later began to collect obituaries. A small fraction of the fruits of her labor can be observed here in what we call the Kay Anslow scrapbook. Within the 2 covers of this quintessentially 70s scrapbook are over 35 pages chock full of newspaper clippings from the 1920s, documenting various ongoings in Hants County from the era, from community fundraising notices for the first ever Elmcroft pool to civic election results. Kay is one of the many women who have contributed to the West Hants Historical Society's extensive scrapbook collection. In fact, women make up the majority of curators in both our general and singular name scrapbook collection, a remarkable feat considering the unfortunate long-standing precedent of historical documentation being a male-dominated field. Take, for example, this scrapbook, curated by Mrs. Annie Bennett from 1903 to 1932. But what makes the medium of scrapbooking different in terms of women's representation? Well, the Oxford English Dictionary attributes the first use of the term scrapbook to the year 1825, just a few years before the beginning of the Victorian era, during which there occurred a significant rise in popular print culture in the West. Cheap newspapers of the day were including leisurely sections known as scraps in the back of their issues, constituent of anything from poems and anecdotes to helpful tips regarding homemaking and domesticity at large. From those scraps arose a trend that saw ephemeral components of the media compilations repurposed as creative fodder, extracted and physically rearranged into something that suited the aesthetic fancy of the reader, with the bound vehicle that contained the newfound collages being called the scrapbook. And because the content that sparked the newfound craft was more entertainment than it was newsworthy, and therefore meant for women, so it came to be that middle and upper class women were the main proponents of and participants in scrapbooking, a tradition that was eventually transcended class, but whose gender was carried on well into the 20th century, when it exploded in popularity and when most, if not all, of the scrapbooks in our collection were made. This 1950 scrapbook, made by Alice Lawrence of 5 Mile River, Hants County, exhibits how, towards the end of the 20th century, scrapbooking became more normalized, popular, and evidently commercialized, as you can see with the images on the front, making this book in particular something that was manufactured for the express purpose of scrapbooking, as it became a more popular hobby, especially for women of the 20th century. And although the medium of scrapbooking was carried through the centuries, the content of the craft did not remain entirely the same as the years progressed, a shift that can be exhibited by a mere glance through our collection. Instead of aesthetically informed arrangements of domestic periodicals, one can find information-based compilations of newspaper clippings accounting for community ongoings, from dance tickets to death tolls for over 100 years. These ephemeral amalgamations are invaluable historical resources, offering an intimate yet simultaneously sweeping view of these smaller communities that are often left out of historical record. And we have women to thank, mainly, who, in an ironic twist of fate, turned a sexist generalization into a vitally important means of historical documentation that has spanned the centuries. And the women who scrapbook didn't just provide a service, they benefited as well, through the normalization of a womanly creative pursuit. Although this stride evidently happened within the confines of a system that remained oppressive towards them, as a creative outlet, scrapbooking nevertheless offered them the means to vent that frustration if they so pleased, in a manner that wasn't so readily available to them before. Additionally, scrapbooking could be used as a means of self-education in an era where women were, in one way or another, often shunned from academic institutions. For example, the collection of art reproductions or small texts on topics of interest allowed for the curation of personal taste. The intentional compilation of writing pieces could serve as models for personal development in the same field. And later on, the methodical acquisition of community bulletins could aid in the construction of a woman's self-sustained knowledge of local ongoings and political developments, independent of the men who dictated it to her gender for so long. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you learned something new about women's history both in Hants County and in general. Our research room is officially open for the spring season on Wednesdays from 10 to 3, so if you saw something here today that caught your eye, make sure to stop in and explore it a little more. Happy belated International Women's Day, and see you next time.